Oh hey, I'm Danny. I made some tools to visualize phase jumps and spectral leakage inside of audio signals, and I wanted to share it with you guys. First off, let's hear a pure tone that has some phase jumps in it. You might need headphones to be able to listen to it clearly. It's kind of groovy, right? Later we'll listen to it again. So we want to understand what's happening here and be able to visualize it also. In order to do that, we need to have a bit of an understanding of what phase is. A visual analogy of what phase is imagine two clocks that are both running at the same rate, but their hands disagree. These are two waves running at the same frequency, but with a phase difference between them. So when we're hearing, it is the audio equivalent of looking at a clock whose hands run at a consistent rate, but every once in a while, their hands jump positions. Now you might think to yourself, hold on. If the jumping of positions is consistent, then the behavior of the clock isn't really at the frequency, which is the default mode of the hand movement, and you'd be right. And that gets us exactly to spectral leakage. Here we have a visualization of a signal above and its Fourier transform below. There will be a link in the description for this widget if you want to use it. This wave has no jumps and completes an integer amount of cycles within the window, and because of that, it can be perfectly described by a single Fourier coefficient, which you can see at the bottom. Now let's see what happens if it completes a non-integer amount of cycles. You see that the amount of Fourier coefficients that it takes to describe this wave now has increased. The coefficient that used to be alone whenever it completed an integer amount of cycles is still dominant, but it can be visualized as some of the energy leaking out to the other frequency bins which are most similar to it. The reason that this happens is because the Fourier transform assumes that it is given an infinite signal, and we're clearly giving it a finite signal. So what it does is it copies that signal back to back to back to back. So if the front and the back do not line up exactly, you get what seems to be a single phase jump. Now let's see what happens whenever we add phase jumps to the signal inside of the window. What we see is very similar to what we saw with spectral leakage, but with more. It's also important to note here that it is not the time domain part of the signal that dictates to the frequency part of the signal below, time domain above, what it should be doing. The Fourier transform is more a tool to be able to see two different sides of the same coin, but is not that one dictates to the other. They're inherently tied together. When we increase the frequency of the phase jumps, we also see an increase in the amount of Fourier coefficients that it takes to represent the signal. And we hear these Fourier coefficients in this signal. And these coefficients correlate to what after a while starts to almost feel like a kick and snare pattern whenever you at least listen to it with headphones. Without it kind of sounds like pops, but still we want a way to describe what are the frequencies of these pops, what makes up these pops. And that's a visualization of how phase jumps add frequencies to signals even when the original signal only had one pure tone. And I hope it was interesting. If you want to use the visualizer, there'll be a link in the description. Thank you very much for your time.